Good evening. The Mayor's calling it the biggest scrappage scheme ever. Drivers are now able to apply for money to ditch their polluting vehicles ahead of the expansion of the ultra-low emission zone in August. Sadiq Khan has made £110 million available to help Londoners whose vehicles do not meet the current requirements. But as the cost of living crisis continues, he's under increasing pressure to add more money to that pot or postpone the expansion altogether. Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
London's car scrapyards aren't going to be short of customers. Sadiq Khan has set up a £110 million fund to encourage Londoners to crush older cars and vans before the new expanded ultra-low emission zone arrives in August. At Redcorns in Tottenham, they expect to be busy, but it's a double-edged sword.
We're doing about 700 cars a day as a business at the moment, expecting it to rise to around about 1,000 cars a day. We're going to see a lot of vehicles come in from that, which is good. On the flip side, we're expecting our parts department to be affected because people are not going to be repairing the older vehicles that they typically have in the past.
Under the new scrappage scheme, Londoners on some benefits can apply for £2,000 to scrap an old car or motorbike. Sole traders and firms with fewer than 10 employees can get £5,000 for a van or £7,000 for a minibus, or up to £9,500 if they also buy an electric vehicle as a replacement.
When we did the previous scheme that the Mayor paid for, we paid £61 million and we got 15,000 vehicles off the road, dirty vehicles, and that was around 2/3 cars and around 1/3 vans.
The proposed expansion of the ULEZ is controversial. Some outer London boroughs want it delayed because of the cost of living crisis, and there are calls for the scrappage scheme to be more generous. Last week, the London Assembly tried to force the Mayor's hand by amending his budget. They want him to put more money into the scrappage scheme. They called on the Mayor to stump up an additional £100 million using cash from a City Hall rainy day fund.
I think it would be very difficult for the Mayor to pull out and just leave money in reserves when Londoners need help to clean up their vehicles if they're to meet his August deadline.
But launching the scrappage scheme at a food charity in Enfield, the Mayor accused Assembly members of playing politics.
I'm quite clear that the £110 million I've announced today is the biggest scrappage scheme ever, which will help tens of thousands of Londoners make the transition.
But you're not prepared to double it?
I'm not prepared to listen to the Tories and not proceed with the ultra-low emission zone. This scheme will save people's lives.
The Redemption Brewery in Tottenham employs 6 people and delivers its beer in an old van which doesn't meet emissions standards.
We would like to get a compliant van. Obviously, we've just come out of COVID. We're still recovering from COVID, so finances are tight. So anything that kind of helps us to make that transition is very welcome.
Eligible Londoners can apply for a grant from the scrappage scheme on TfL's website.
Now, Simon, we heard from Sadiq Khan there. He wasn't giving much away, was he? But can the London Assembly force him to cough up more cash on this?
In theory, yes. The reality is no. Last week's amendment to the Mayor's budget telling him to put another £100 million into the scrappage scheme was proposed by the Lib Dems, backed by the Greens. But the Tories and Labour members abstained, so the vote passed. When the budget comes back before the Assembly for final ratification, Labour members will almost certainly fall in line behind Sadiq Khan and give him their support. But the Mayor is coming under increasing pressure to make some concessions. Outer London boroughs, Lib Dem and Tory, have been vocal in calling for him to postpone and extend the scrappage scheme. And last week, the leader of a Labour council, Darren Rodwell, who leads Barking and Dagenham Council, echoed very much the same message. And there are some London Labour MPs who also would like the Mayor to press the pause button.
All right, so that pressure not necessarily going away. Simon, thank you.
Tomorrow, London will be feeling the twin impact of closed schools and very few trains because of strike action. Drivers will be walking out because of that long-running row over better pay and conditions, once again leaving Londoners struggling to get around town. Well, our political correspondent Simon Harris has the latest.
400,000 people a day use trains owned by GTR. Its services operate under the banners of Gatwick Express, Great Northern, Southern and Thameslink. But tomorrow, this vital part of London's commuter network will once again come to a standstill.
Tomorrow and again on Friday, the 3rd of February, we won't be running any services at all on our network, unfortunately. And that is due to national action being taken by ASLEF, the trade union that represents train drivers.
Some passengers passing through Paddington will fare a little better. The Elizabeth Line and Heathrow Express will have a normal timetable. But Great Western will only run trains to Reading and Bristol. The dispute is about pay and working on Sundays.
This is about being more flexible in terms of the working arrangements. So it could be that we want people to be more rostered to cope with a 7-day railway. We've got lots of people who are now travelling for leisure. So we want those people working at weekends as part of their natural working week.
Train companies saying they won't run any services out of London include Avanti West Coast, Chiltern, East Midlands, Gatwick Express, Great Northern, London North Western, South Eastern, Southern and Thameslink. There'll be a reduced service on Great Western, Greater Anglia and LNER. London commuters and businesses have had to put up with strikes on trains and tubes for almost a year. Tomorrow's walkout by drivers is the 7th in their dispute over pay, and there are still unresolved disputes involving station staff, signallers and underground workers. ASLEF drivers have been offered a 4% pay rise this year and another 4% next year, but there's no sign of agreement between the two sides.
We've gone back 6 months. The employers have put out a proposal. They did it in public. They press released it. We hadn't had sight of it, weren't able to respond to it. And unfortunately, our members all saw it and took a view that they did not like what it contained.
The train companies, represented by the Rail Delivery Group, dispute that version of events. The RDG accuses ASLEF of making false statements. London commuters are caught in the crossfire.
So, Simon, is there any end in sight to this?
Well, the Rail Delivery Group, which represents the train companies and the union ASLEF, aren't even talking at the moment. But I get the impression that might change once these strikes are over, so possibility of it moving forward with fresh talks next week. As for the dispute between the RMT and the train companies, well, the union is consulting its members on the most up-to-date pay offer, so that's looking a little more hopeful, and we should know the result of that next week. But I think for many people, the immediate concern is tomorrow when the train strike coincides with the teachers' strike, leaving many with both commuting and childcare challenges.
OK, Simon, thanks very much.
Good evening. Teaching strikes have hit London harder than any other part of the country. Almost 3/4 of all schools in the capital were predicted to close or partially close, causing a headache for parents, many who've had to stay at home too. According to unions, 50,000 teachers across the capital walked out today. Some were joined by parents and children on a huge march at Whitehall, but with more possible strikes on the way. For how long will that support last? Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
Across London, classrooms were deserted. Many schools, like this one in Tulse Hill, were forced to close. Others imposed restrictions on who could come in. Instead of the noisy bustle of children in playgrounds, there was silence.
Unfortunately, we have had to close the school completely to children today because the vast majority of our teachers have taken industrial action and striking today.
Not far away, the leader of the Teachers' Union arrived to show her support for strikers at Bishop Thomas Grant Secondary.
Whether you've got kids or not, you should want our children to be well educated when they leave school. I think that's going to become a worse and worse problem if we don't sort it out now.
Across South London in Wandsworth, Keaton, a sixth former, was studying in the kitchen instead of the classroom. But it's not a novelty.
That's something that I think I've learned to do because of COVID, because of online learning, where we didn't have that rigid schedule and we were sort of given that opportunity. I think it was an opportunity to learn how to manage our own time effectively.
But it wasn't just schools where the doors were closed. Many of London's railway stations also shut up shop for the day as a strike by the train drivers' union ASLEF brought commuter lines to a standstill. Thanks to lessons learned from COVID, many commuters find it easy to switch to home working during a train strike. But working from home during a teacher's strike is another matter. Juggling childcare and doing a day's work is a challenge. In Walthamstow, some parents chose to take advantage of a local play centre to give their children something to do.
They're working from home, but needless to say, you can't work from home and have two active children. So our little sister is still at the childminder, but obviously she needed help. So this morning we're going to do this.
Luckily I do shift work, so today was one of my days off anyway, so it hasn't been too much change in the routine.
We're lucky that we've got friends whose children are at the same school, they live really nearby, so we're basically dividing it up between ourselves and taking shifts.
In central London, many teachers joined a march organised by the TUC in support of unions demanding above-inflation pay rises.
That is not on the table. We cannot risk fueling inflation. We've said very much we take this in seriously and we will halve inflation this year. We need to get rid of the problem of inflation for everybody, not just have some people who get above inflation pay rises.
This was the biggest day of coordinated strikes in a long time. It may not be the last. Simon Harris, ITV News, Walthamstow.
A lorry driver had to be escorted out of a forum at City Hall this morning after heckling the mayor over the ULEZ expansion. Sadiq Khan was hosting a live audience with Martin Lewis, where the cost of living crisis was top of the agenda. The money-saving expert threw the mayor a curveball, though, admitting that now didn't feel like the right time for a new charge to be imposed on Londoners. Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
It was billed as a one-off live event to help Londoners tackle the cost of living crisis. Sadiq Khan in City Hall getting tips from the financial expert Martin Lewis. But they clearly weren't on the same page when it came to the mayor's clean air plans.
How will extending the ULEZ help people struggling with the cost of living?
Each year in our city, roughly speaking, 4,000 Londoners died prematurely because of the poison in the air we can't see. It's invisible.
But Martin Lewis decided to challenge his host.
Mr. Meadow, if I may be honest, while the reasons behind that are good, the timing is pretty tough to do it this year amidst the cost of living crisis.
Suddenly, the mayor was interrupted by another voice, this time from the audience.
You're going to put the mental health, the stress, the anxiety up here beyond their capabilities and beyond their capability of living and existing. They won't be able to. They won't be able to deal with the stress.
After heckling the mayor for 2.5 minutes, Angie Donnelly, a truck driver from Dagenham, was escorted out of City Hall, by now quite angry.
That man wants us to pay back the debt he created for TfL. This is what this is about.
He says he's cleaning up London's air.
No, how can he be cleaning up London's air when we've all got new vehicles?
Angie Donnelly's intervention came as relations between Sadiq Khan and some London boroughs soured even further. The mayor's decision to press ahead with the ULEZ expansion has prompted 4 outer London Tory councils to consider taking legal action. They've now been sent letters by Transport for London, setting a deadline for them to cooperate with the mayor's plan. TfL says if the councils don't sign by today what's known as a Section 8 agreement allowing the installation of signs and cameras, then TfL will be minded to proceed with the above works without any such agreement under its direct installation powers in line with our required programme dates.
We are not going to cooperate. We are testing, we are going to challenge the mayor on his rationale for the expansion of ULEZ. We don't believe the argument about air quality. We certainly don't believe the argument about the loss of life that is occurring in outer London.
Back at City Hall, the mayor and his guest were sticking to their guns.
It is a difficult year to be introducing ULEZ amidst the cost of living crisis, and I hope and suspect we might see a little bit more softening coming from the mayor's office.
I spend too much time speaking to health experts and clinicians, businesses suffering because of congestion, speaking to firefighters who have to deal with heat waves last summer. London can't afford to delay.
But the mayor seems to be under mounting pressure over his flagship policy. Simon Harris, ITV News, City Hall.
Simon's here. And Simon, Londoners are facing, financial pressure from all angles. So calls for the mayor to delay his ULEZ proposals aren't going to go away, are they?
No, but the mayor seems determined to resist them. That letter sent by TfL to Harrow, Hillingdon, Bexley and Bromley is pretty clear that if those boroughs don't agree by today to cooperate with TfL, then the work will go ahead anyway, with or without their backing to install the signs and cameras that will make ULEZ possible. Having said that, TfL tells me that they're not going to push ahead with the work immediately. They still want to work with the boroughs. The boroughs, in turn, are waiting to hear from their lawyers to see if there is a basis for a legal challenge against the mayor's expansion plans.
OK, Simon, thanks very much indeed.